Welcome to the latest edition of Denny's Desk. I thought we'd try something new, and because I'm on both Facebook and Twitter, we asked that people ask us questions, and I respond to those questions. But first of all, I want to talk about a major victory I had in Congress just a couple days ago. One of the things that I was approached with in March was the fact that the EPA was putting in place regulations requiring contractors who are doing work on homes that are older than 1978 to have certification if they're going to impact 6 square feet of a wall because of the potential of disturbing lead-based paint. You can see why there's concern. You know, children were showing elevated signs of lead in their bloodstream, and so it is a safety concern. But the problem was the regulations were put into place, a date was set, but there was nobody out to train the contractors. And so if a homeowner needed work and there were no contractors in the area that had gone through the training, the work couldn't get done. Or if they went ahead and did the work and didn't have a certification, there was going to be a fine of $37,000 per day per instance. And that was ridiculous. It just didn't make any sense. So I immediately introduced legislation to try and delay the implementation date. I brought in a group of home builders in Washington, D.C. to meet with the person over at EPA that was heading it up, and I didn't get any action. They said, no, we're not going to change the date. It is going to go into place, and anybody that violates it will be fined. We continued to apply pressure. As I said, I introduced legislation. When I got co-sponsors, we wrote letters. I teamed up with Senator Inhofe in the Senate, and ultimately we were able to apply so much pressure to the EPA that they have delayed the effective date until the end of December of this year, giving the contractors throughout Montana additional time to get the training necessary to know how to deal with lead-based paint. So that's just one more example of how you get things done where you don't necessarily have to introduce legislation. You can work with a federal agency and actually get something accomplished. Oftentimes there are those that want to just suggest that if you don't pass a bill, you haven't gotten anything done. But on any given day, we become a liaison between the constituency that we represent and the federal agencies that seem to have become more and more bureaucratic. And many of our legislative victories are actually regulatory victories, just trying to work things out with sometimes an uncaring or overly burdensome federal government. Let me get to the two questions that were asked via Twitter. This one actually came in via Facebook. It's from Lorian Leeds, and it says, secure our borders, protect America's towns along the border, protect America from all who walk over and can do it harm, physically, financially, etc. No question. I've often said, as I travel Montana's 56 counties, as I do continually, that a country that does not control its borders cannot control its sovereignty. It's just plain and simple. We have to be able to control our borders. Now, we want to have people coming in. We all came in as immigrants, but the problem is our borders have become so porous that people are coming across, and it's creating a problem. And it especially creates a problem along the southern border, but we're finding that as we get tougher on the southern border, they try and leak into the northern border. Many of the things that we've done on the southern border is building fence, additional sensors, doubling the agents, tunneling legislation. If you allow tunneling to occur on your property on the United States side, there are severe fines. We've ended the catch and release program where they would catch them, but they had no place to house them until they deported them back, and so they let them out. And under President Bush and some of our legislation, we ended that. We built facilities where we could house them. They're not frilly. They're just kind of warehousing, but we're able to process and get them back out. I am the co-chair of the Northern Border Caucus. I co-chair that with Bart Stupak, a Democrat from Michigan. Bart is retiring in this Congress, so there'll be a new Democrat that co-chairs it, but I'm the Republican chair in the House of Representatives because other than Alaska, we have the largest border with Canada or a foreign country. And so that's why it was important for me to be on this. Bart and I met last week with Michael Fisher, the chief of the Border Patrol. He's the head guy. And we called him in, and we wanted to have a conversation specific to the situation that occurs along the entire northern border, where along the federal properties, Department of Interior, whether it's the Bureau of Land Management or the Forest Service or the Department of Agriculture, which is the Forest Service, we're not allowing access to the Border Patrol for motorized vehicles northern border. And so we wanted to have that conversation, make our wishes known. Montana loses because of a porous border. You don't think of it, but our Constitution requires in the census that all inhabitants be counted, not citizens. And that's been tested. Our Constitution was written the way it was for a reason, and so we count inhabitants. The difficulty is, because they're here illegally, doesn't mean that they're not inhabitants. They're not citizens, but they are inhabitants, and so they're counted, which is ridiculous, but they are counted. And unfortunately, then, we've determined the fact that there are probably 5 congressmen and women in California more than they would get under the census if we only counted citizens. The same with Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Florida. And so you can see Montana loses representation in Congress. That's not right. The second area we lose is through our tax dollars. When the federal government distributes money, they distribute it back to the states based upon population. So if there's an overcount of illegal aliens in the census, they're getting more of our tax dollars than they deserve as well. And so I come down real hard on the whole issue of amnesty. I'm against amnesty. I think we need to control the borders, and then I think we can talk about a comprehensive immigration policy. The second question I was asked via Twitter by Kay Casey was, please address how your vow to not add earmarks to bills will benefit cash-strapped Montana programs. Well, the problem, and it's spending. And we've come to a situation where under this new administration, part of the reason I think we lost the majority and we're in the penalty box, but part of it was that we were spending too much money. Well, they have quadrupled the deficit and doubled the debt. And so if spending was the problem, then you can't solve the spending problem by spending more. And that's the difficulty. And there were some that said that my move on earmarks was symbolic. I didn't say that. But symbolism does not have to be unimportant either or meaningless. What you do is, first of all, as a group, and we did in the Republican Congress, we said no earmarks for this year. And then we followed that up with legislation to say any money saved by not having earmarks has to go towards debt retirement or deficit in our budget. And then you move into spending reform measures like zero-based budgeting. I continue to support and endorse and vote for and introduce a balanced budget requirement in our U.S. Constitution. We have to come to grips with our spending in this country. We cannot continue to try and spend our way into prosperity, and that's why we're seeing that the trillion-dollar stimulus package has not worked. Where are the jobs? That's why we're seeing that all these little son-of-jobs programs are not working. Again, where are the jobs? And the difficulty is we've topped $13 trillion in our debt, and that money has to be paid back. That's going to be very difficult to do, but they're setting us up for the largest tax increase in the history of the country at the end of this year. We have to come to grips with our spending issue. So I liken it to my own children. I said it in the debate last week, and there are years when you're doing pretty well financially on the ranch. The kids come with a list at Christmas, and you do as much as you possibly can. And when you got tough years, you learn that you don't get to do everything you want to do. You can't buy the new pickup. You can't buy the squeeze chute. You might make do with the one you've got. You right size, you downsize, and that's called accountability, and it's called transparency, and I think that's what the American public wants. So when it comes to spending, I'm trying to spend the taxpayer dollars as if it was my own, because part of it is my own, and what I want to do is be as conservative as I possibly can while still providing the services that people of America want.